All right, when you're ready. Oh, hold on. We're starting the next presentation, if that's okay with you. You okay with that? All right, when you're ready.
Good evening. My name is Hans Bashan.
Lucretia Harden.
Jennifer Eckert.
And our project is on the process of cheddar cheese. All right, just a quick overview. We will be discussing about, talk about the introduction, the history of cheese, the process flow diagram. We have Jennifer Eckert, and she'll be going over the food chemistry aspect portion. And we have Lucretia Harden, who's going over food microbiology portion. And I will be going over the food engineering portion, followed by the reference. So, why cheddar cheese? We chose cheddar cheese because of the economic importance. The United States consumes about 34 pounds of cheddar cheese per person each year. Cheddar cheese is one of the most commonly used cheese in the United States. A history of cheddar cheese. Cheddar cheese originated in the village of Cheddar, England. Joseph Harding, known as the father of cheddar cheese. And cheddar cheese has a range of flavors from mild to extra sharp. Next we have the production of cheese, and this is the process flow diagram. And I'm just going to leave it up here for a couple of seconds, and we'll go over it in further detail later on. All right, next I'll hand over to Miss Jennifer Eckert.
Okay, so we have our cheddar cheese here. Cheddar cheese has a 30 to 40% moisture content. It is high in protein, fat, and calcium, so it's good for the protein and the calcium, not so much the fat. And the pH is around 5, and the water activity is around 0.96, 0 or lower. Okay, so before we can look at the cheese composition, first we need to look at what the cheese is actually made of, which is milk. And milk is an oil and water emulsion, and within that you have your proteins, which is the casein and the whey, your fat, your water, your lactose, which is also your sugar. So within that milk, you have your milk fat globules, and upon those you have your casein myosols. Now upon those casein myosols, you have your kappa caseins, which I'll get back to in a minute. So in order for you to extract your caseins and just be your wheys, just be left with your caseins and your proteins, you need to break down those proteins and coagulate the milk. So in order to do that, you need to use an enzyme called rennet. Rennet is an enzyme that comes from the calf's stomach, and that is what is going to help coagulate that milk. Okay, so on the myocell, you have the kappa casein, and the kappa casein has long hair fibers that has a negative charge on the outside, and on the inside it has a positive charge. And those negative ends like to interact with the water. So as long as those kappa caseins are interacting with the water, you are not going to have coagulation with your milk. So the rennet is going to come in and break down those proteins into nature the structure so that your milk can come together and coagulate. Within that rennet, you have chymiosin, which is the main component that denatures that protein. There are many different types of ways that chymiosin can be made. Most commercially processed cheese do not use the chymiosin rennet that comes from the cows, but Lucretia will explain those different types of rennets later. Okay, so once your rennet separates the milk, you're going to have your wheys and your curds. And your whey is going to be the sugar and the water and the whey part of the protein, and then you're just going to be left with the casein protein and your fat content. Once this process occurs, it's important for the pH to be at a 6. Anything below a 6 will cause you to have the kernels to not come together nicely, and you do not want that when making cheddar cheese. So, as I stated before about the pH needing to be 0.6 when the whey is expelled. So, during the salting process, the pH needs to be at a content of 5.4 to ensure that the curds can come together and deliver the nice texture you need for your cheddar cheese. The salt is going to act as a preservative, and it's going to inhibit the microbial microbial growth of the process throughout the aging process, and it's also going to add a nice rich flavor to your cheese. And because of all the salt content in the cheese, you're going to have a low water activity because it's going to help keep that water activity to a minimum, which will help stop those undesirable organisms from keep them at bay.
Part of the micro portion of cheddar cheese, this is the starter cultures for cheddar cheese, Lactobacillus and Streptococcus, and some of the coagulants, and these are the coagulants for cheddar cheese. The animal-based coagulant is rennet, and it's derived from ruminant-based animals, and it comes from their fourth stomach. And then there's microbial-based rennet, and it comes from a mold called Yersinia, and it's used as a coagulant. And then there's the acid-based coagulant, which could be used for like citric acid or acetic acid. And these are just some of the undesirable organisms that could affect cheddar cheese: E. coli, Salmonella, Listeria, and Staphylococcus aureus. And one of the recent issues with cheddar cheese was the Kraft Singles recall. It was a voluntary recall. It had a choking hazard with the product. When you peeled off the wrapper to get the cheese out, pieces of plastic were still attached to the cheese, and if not properly seen before eating, it caused a choking hazard. And that recall was done in July of this year, recently, and in July it recalled 36,000 cases of cheddar cheese, both of the white and American cheddar variety. Recently, as of September, it recalled 355,000 extra products that expanded over 11 different countries. And one of the research topics that I looked at was the difference between pasteurization and the difference in pasteurization and raw milk in cheddar cheese. The milk that was pasteurized used a low temp, long time pasteurization, and it aged for 6 months. And in the study, they determined that the ripening in a pasteurized cheese was better than that of the raw milk because the enzymes that were in the cheese did not break down as much in the pasteurized cheese as they did in the raw milk.
All right, so this is a food processing portion. First start with your raw ingredient, which is milk, and milk is held in a big storage tank. Then next we have the pasteurization of that milk, where your color and a starter has been added, and the color to get that color, annatto is added. And for the type of pasteurization we used was a high temperature short time pasteurization, where the temperature was controlled at 71 degrees Celsius for 15 to 20 seconds. Next we have the standardization and filtration. And what this is, this equipment is, we use it to get a good protein to fat ratio to make a good quality cheese and have a better yield. Next we have the coagulation step, and where we add the fermented microorganisms. And before we add the rennet, the tank has to be incubated for 86 degrees Fahrenheit for the acidity levels to reach 0.2% before we add the rennet. And for the coagulation, it has to sit for 30 minutes. Next we have cutting the curds. And this process we just cut the curds in blocks. Next we have the stirring and cooking, where it's been cooked at 100 degrees Fahrenheit and then waves drained. Next step we have the milling process, and we want to mill to increase the surface area. And then next we have the big S, it stands for salting, and where the curds are on a conveyor belt and salt has been added and then additional weight has been drained. Next we have pressing, and in this figure you have the cheese presser. And the cheese presser, what it does is press the curds for a certain amount of time, and it also drain additional weight. And next we have the molding, and with the molding, you just want to get the shape of the cheese. Next we have the ripening and storage, and it's the cheese is dried for 5 days at 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and then waxed and vacuum packaged and cured at 40 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 to 12 months. Then we have the new innovation of cheese research. So in figure point 1, it shows a wooden mold, because traditionally molds were made out of reeds, wood, and clay. And through innovation of cheese research and technology and product development, the dairy industry is able to provide chefs and food formulators and consumers more varieties of form of cheese to use. And this page shows the 2 articles that were published on research. You have the lactate concentration and pH are critical to low sodium cheese safety, and you have the impact of salt replacements on cheddar cheese manufacturing quality. Next, I'll hand it over to Lucretia Harding, and she'll be going over some critical control points.
So some of the critical control points in our processing, for one, the first one is in the pasteurization. We have to make sure that we heat the milk to the specific temperature for the amount of time so it can kill any microbes that might be present. The second CCP is in the cutting. We have to make sure that none of the cutting material ends up in the final product. And the third one is in the milling. And because we mill base right after cooking, some of the material, the residue from the cooking of the cheese could be left in the milling and could cause organism growth, which could be an issue later on in further processing.
And thank you for your time, and any questions?